On 9/11, I was in the courthouse in Freehold, New Jersey, with someone who was going through a court hearing, and we were standing in the hallway, and someone came through and said, "A plane has just hit the towers." And of course we were all concerned and very upset, and then someone came back and said, "Another plane has hit the towers," and then all of a sudden it was, the towers have collapsed. And then we heard about Pennsylvania and Washington, D.C., and by then we realized that something really vital was happening in the country, that somehow we were under attack. On that evening, we threw open the doors at St. James and Bradley Beach and held a service, a prayer service, and Father Kenneth Glockow and myself walked out in front of the altar, and when we turned around, the church was packed. It was really overwhelming. There were families standing along in the side aisles, the church with their babies in their hands. It was overwhelming to realize the anguish that people were going through, and the uncertainty, and the feeling of helplessness, that you didn't know what was happening to our country and where we were going from there. I felt this call to help in some way, and found out that there was a need for chaplains to be at Ground Zero, to help with the recovery, to be there to support the rescue workers, and to support people as they were going through the recovery. I came back and spoke to the parish about developing our own team to go to Ground Zero, which they did, and they went every month for the whole 8 to 9 months. We walked the perimeter all night long. I did mostly night. I worked overnight. There were 12-hour shifts. We were there to go to the centers, talk to the rescue workers. We stood on the pile and waited to be called up for remains that might be pulled out. I remember the first night that I arrived to work on the pile, and I'm thinking, this is like a Cecil B. DeMille's screen set. It was so surreal. The shadows and the smells, and it was just, people were sifting through the dirt and the rubble to see if they could find parts of remains or rings. There were blessings for all of those that were there. The rescue workers themselves were totally dedicated to having this blessing done for anything that was recovered. There was a ritual where each one was put on a stretcher, brought into the morgue. The firemen and the policemen made a line, and they saluted as the body was brought into the morgue, and everyone stopped and a blessing was given. It was totally a total ecumenical type of blessing. I mean, that is the nature of a chaplain, that you were there for anyone, for whatever denomination, and of course most of the time we didn't know what their denomination was. I think one of the most amazing things for me, it was in October, and we were at a temporary morgue, had moved to Liberty Street, and we heard that there had been a big recovery on the south side by the second tower. And so they asked any of the chaplains that were going to be on to please come down, because there were going to be quite a few recoveries. And I stood on the edge of that pile waiting to be called up, because they were still trying to recover one body. And I looked up, and the south wall had broken away, and the way the light hit it, it had formed a row of crosses right where the recovery was taking place. And it was like you just knew that God was in this place. A while later, I was in Timor, and we were talking about incidents with the EMTs and the other rescue workers that were sitting there, about how we saw God in this place in so many ways. And I was talking about that night, and there was an EMT there who said, even for me, a Jew, I remember seeing that on the other side, from the other side, and I thought, God is in this place. One of my biggest faith experience was in the chapel at St. Paul's. I was standing at the altar with Father Ken Glockow, who was the celebrant, and I was deacon. And I looked around, and I thought, this is what the church is meant to be. There were people giving out medication. There were people in the back feeding others. There were people giving out clothing. In another part, there was a chiropractor helping adjust people's back, and massage therapists. There were people sleeping in the pews. And it was just overwhelming to me that this is what we were meant to be, the servant ministers of God. That lives with me to this day, you know, especially as a deacon who believes that, you know, we are meant to be in the world, and, you know, we're to bring the church to the world and bring the concerns of the world to the church. We're supposed to be there in times of crisis or in times of trouble for all people.